Welcome back to the Situation Room. We are talking about the situation as it stands today. We know that there's going to be a meeting on Monday where, of course, both Pakistan and India will lay down whatever information is and, of course, the mediation that is to follow. But at this time, the situation as it stands today is, of course, that Pakistan, having emerged as the victor in this war that was, of course, perpetrated by India. And as we see the situation again, first of course we saw the false flag operation, which was then conveniently preceded by a termination, revocation of the Indus Water Treaty. We'll be talking about the ramifications at this time of this of course, right now as the situation stands of this standoff as we see at this time, of this ceasefire as we see at this time, and what do we expect now in terms of the future, in terms of a neighbor that is openly hostile, in terms of a neighbor which we have shown that we have the power, we have the skill, and we have the machinery to, of course, fight them in any kind of combat. In terms of international recognition that Pakistan is not a neighbor that lacks in any way, shape or form against India. We'll be talking about all of that. I have with me Jauhar Saleem, who is former President IRS and also Foreign Secretary. Thank you for being with us today. We have also with us Aamir Masood, who's former Air Marshal. I'm going to go to Aamir Saab and then come back to you in the studio. Aamir Saab, can you hear me? I think there's a problem with audio. Jauhar Saab, as the situation stands today, first of all, you know, if we look at X, I want to start off with this because the situation, whatever it may be, the reality, it doesn't seem to be seeping in the Indians, because there's again a lot of vituperative content coming, there's a lot of abuse, there's a lot of, you know, what is being said is inaccuracy really. Do you think that's just a false bravado, or do you think that, you know, they're just delusional?
Well, there's the false bravado, there's a lot of misinformation coming, and it's deliberate, you know, it's not delusional. It is very much, I think it's well deliberated. This is a consistent policy that they have been acting upon for a long time now. Consistent misinformation, disinformation, trying to malign Pakistan, trying to label Pakistan as a country sponsoring terrorism. What we had seen in the last few weeks since April 22nd, in particular, that India's propaganda, this misinformation campaign, did not really work. Their narrative that Pakistan had sort of, you know, inflicted upon terrorism on India, inflicted terrorism upon India, and therefore required to be, in their words, punished. That did not really fly. There was no traction. And what we saw, statements coming from around the world calling for restraint, exercising of restraint on both sides, calling upon on both sides for exercising restraint. Pakistan was already exercising restraint. So it was very clear that the statements were then focused on India primarily, because they were the one who kept on coming up with very provocative, very threatening language, very intimidating language, eventually culminating in what? A military misadventure. That was despite the warnings that they got from all the world leaders not to do so. Despite that, because there was no country which came up with a statement supporting India's sort of, you know, like misadventure. And then, of course, we also, what happened? You know, eventually they had to eat the humble pie and agree upon not only ceasefire, but more importantly even, I would say, that talks with Pakistan. Because for the last many years, India has completely backed out of any dialogue with Pakistan.
But do you think, you know, I'm going to interject, do you think that there's a realization that, you know, their government, Modi-led government, has propelled them into perhaps an uncharted territory? Because, you know, of course, on the one hand, they don't seem to have anticipated the kind of power, the kind of military might that Pakistan exercised. They don't seem to have anticipated the kind of equipment. They don't seem to have had any real intel of what Pakistan is capable of.
Yeah, in some ways, there are 3 points here, I think. Number one, India had this they had this false notion that because since 2019, they have been investing humongously into military technologies. Their military budget is $85 billion a year. Pakistan's budget is $10 billion a year, military defense budget. And they have been one of the biggest, acquirers of military weaponry in the world. The most sophisticated, the Rafales, the S-400.
And even when we remember when the Abhinandan saga happened, we know that Modi made comments
exactly,
about how,
he said, oh,
if they had Rafales, and they did this time round.
Exactly. He had said that, oh, if we had Rafales, then we would have, then we would have taught Pakistan a lesson. Now this time they had the Rafales, they had S-400, they had many other sophisticated equipment. And I had, in fact, in my comments about a week ago, I had mentioned that India will test Pakistan, Pakistan's deterrence, despite the because the question was asked to me whether, because there's intense diplomatic pressure from all over the world, do you think that India would take that pressure and still defy that pressure and attack Pakistan? I said, that is what I think, because they would want to test Pakistan's deterrence, because they have now this notion that they are far superior in military terms, in military technology that they have, and because of the investments they've made. And so when they did that, Pakistan's response was not just adequate, it was befitting. It was much beyond the expectation.
But now, if we move forward to where we are at this time, first of all, we don't choose who our neighbors are. In this instance, for better or worse, India's there to stay. Do you think that if there is an acknowledgement on the other side that Pakistan is indeed a neighbor to be reckoned with, there can be a working relationship, or you think that that possibility is impossible?
No, definitely. You see, we always want to give peace a chance, dialogue a chance. Pakistan is a peaceful country, a responsible state, which believes that all disputes can be resolved peacefully through peaceful negotiations as per international laws, the concerned United Nations Security Council resolutions, wherever they are applicable as per the UN Charter. And if India would if they would behave responsibly, if they would act decently, if they would act in a manner where we would feel that they are forthcoming, they are serious in a meaningful, and meaningful is the key term here. If we would see that they are interested in engaging in a meaningful dialogue, whereupon all those issues which are plaguing the relations between the two countries, and not just the two countries, which are plaguing the whole region's security and stability for so many years, have kept the whole region hostage, and blocked the development and the peace and prosperity. So if we will see that, but what are the issues here? The issues here are, for instance, well, a new issue has cropped up which was not even there before. They have
the Indus Water Treaty.
The Indus Water Treaty, number one. So they have said they put it in abeyance, so they have to nullify that action. Then, of course, they always harp upon the theme of terrorism. Okay, discuss terrorism. We want to discuss terrorism with that because we are the biggest victims of terrorism, and we believe that they have been involved in fomenting terrorism in Pakistan. So yes, we would like to discuss, because they are propagating this false propaganda all over the world that Pakistan is is involved in state-sponsored terrorism, and they are the victims. So that could be one agenda item, and we have already said we are willing for an impartial, unbiased investigation of this incident as well, which happened on April 22nd. The second is their actions that they took on August 19. On August 5th, I think, 2019. Yes. Article 370 was abrogated, 35. And 35 is more important because abrogating that means that they can change the demographic balance there, and that is against the spirit of Shimla and the international law, and changes the whole dynamic. Yeah. And lastly, if they could revive the composite dialogue that we used to have between the two countries for for resolution of Jammu and Kashmir dispute in its entirety.
Kashmir and of course we've also seen the recent comments from the US President in that regard. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how it doesn't, it seems that the world is recognizing that it's not a bilateral issue but an international issue at this time.
Exactly, and this is a big step forward in for us. Why? Because they thought, the Indians felt that Modi felt that he had resolved Kashmir on his terms by whatever the actions he took in 2019. But now the whole world, you see everywhere the news coverage has been, they mentioned the disputed territory of Kashmir, the Indian controlled Kashmir. So it seems
to have backfired in a sense.
Exactly, and when President Trump said that I am ready to mediate, I'm willing to mediate on Kashmir. Now this has been Pakistan's long-standing demand, that there should be mediation on Kashmir, because bilaterally the issue was not being resolved. And like the world saying that, and the US President saying that now, I think it really changes everything in terms of the international perception of this issue. And now it is upon India. I think it is for them to see that, to see it positively, not see it as a defeat, but rather see it as an opportunity.
I want to talk about whether there is a possibility in Modi's India of, for rational thought at all. Let me come back to you on that. We have with us Aamir Masood, who's a former Air Marshal. Aamir Saab, can you hear me? We know, and if we look at the recent press conference that's happening, even as we speak in India by their Air Force personnel, we will be able to see that they seem to have inadvertently admitted to the prowess or, the technique, our ability as a force, as far as our Air Force is concerned in this combat, and the fact that, really Pakistan has emerged the victor here. How do you look at this, and when this reality is coming out in different phases in the face of the kind of abuse that is generally at display in any discourse by the Indian side, unfortunately, do you think, like I was saying to Jauhar Saab here, that there will be a possibility of some sane, some rational talks that can perhaps dictate the future, some kind of TORs for our relationship with India in the future, because of course the Indus Water Treaty, the control of our waters, issues like those can be effectively dealt with by various provisions in the UN Charter. Do you think that there is that ability for them to come to those kind of terms at all?
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your first part of the question regarding the press conference, I would say that they have tacitly admitted that there had been some sort of damages which they have been able to absorb, and they also have accepted the respect for the Pakistan Air Force. And I think that as air warrior, I would also say that we should never undermine the enemy, and this is the first thing that you should know, that you should respect, and you should be able to you should not be very much complacent regarding your actions. Till the time you respect your enemy, you will always be able to prepare yourself well as well. So this is a good sign, that they have not been very much irrational as far as their claims are concerned, especially the Air Force person. But though he said that we are still in a state of conflict and still in a state of contingency and war, so he is not, clear about the claims at that time. He doesn't want to reveal anything to the audience. So this is one part, and I also personally think that, rather than going for a sort of rhetoric and always going for claims, the big claims, we should be very much rational in this. And our press had been very rational. Our, leadership has been very rational in our claims. And this is how we expect the enemy to be. However, this rationality doesn't seems to be there in the national leadership of India. And that is why I will be very
I want to come to that. I want to come to that, Aamir Saab. There's also, during this press conference, it was repeatedly said that, it is, no, but Pakistan also has incurred losses, or Pakistan also has incurred damage. The thing is, Pakistan Air Force, and of course, when we say these kind of comments come from the forces in any country, in in a press conference, in a presser, essentially, you think there's too much pressure of the government overall, and of course Modi's India, for there to be, again, like I said, any kind of unilateral rationality or any kind of independence in any institution, to come out and show the courage, to show the kind of bravery and the courage that is needed to come out and state things as they are at this time, rather than as they would have wanted them to be.
Uh, I think that if you want to know about this thing, that the institutions are speaking the truth and they have been given that much open hand to say the facts, and this is what is visible. So I personally think that this is a good sign for any organization, any institution, any country, that any of the institution is coming out and accepting the fact. And I think that should not be taken as a sort of what you can say, the total defeat sort of thing. Rather, any all institutions. Remember, I personally think, and this we have seen in the history of wars. Even you can remember the Pearl Harbor. You also know what has been happening with the air defense system of Israel. You can see the uh, vulnerability of American forces in Afghanistan, the Russian forces in Ukraine. So all the big powers, the mighty powers, they are still impregnable. I mean, they cannot say that they are not impregnable. You can still penetrate their defenses. There will always be losses. There will always be some damages, because no country can claim to be impregnable in this world, I would say. The type of weapons which we have today in the modern warfare, the type of drones and the number of drones we have, and the number of projectiles and their ranges we have, so it is good that they have accepted the damages, etc. And so will be the damages on either side. So this has to be, I mean, nobody can hide the damages also. Remember this thing. The satellite imagery, the visibility of your sensors is so clear that you can actually see the images and every inch of the other country, and you can exactly make out what it was an hour before and what it is after the damage. So it's very difficult today to hide the images. But otherwise, if somebody is accepting this thing, it is bold on his part. It is more being pragmatic on
Air
his part.
Marshal, I want to ask your opinion and your expertise on how things are changing in terms of the warfare. Of course, also, if you look at this war, this more recent, aggression that we've seen come from the Indian side, the way that we've dealt with it, the way that we've responded, it also shows that there's a change overall in combat, in technique, in the way that this kind of combat is to be fought. And could you elucidate on that a little bit?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Actually, everything is changing in war. War is changing in every domain. War is changing in the domain of narrative. War is changing in the psychological domain. The war is changing in the kinetic domain and also in the non-kinetic domain. So if I break it down to the kinetic and non-kinetic, then kinetic domain is the one where you physically have the use of force. So in that case, we have got weapons which are so long-range weapons that you can shoot from either side of the border while staying within your border, as it did happen during this conflict. You are actually not bursting their borders by your aircraft or entering physically, whereas your weapon is entering their borders and violating them. So this has happened exactly during this war air battle also, and the battle and the projectiles which were fired from the ground also. So this is one thing. Second thing is the technology advancement as far as the sensors and shooters are concerned, as it's mentioned, that you have a visibility of every inch of the battlefield which is there with the enemy. Third thing is the number of aircraft and the tempo of aircraft is increasing, or the tempo of the war has increased tremendously. And because of that, there are chances of having more losses, more saturation of airspace, and more friendly fire also. As far as the non-kinetic domain is concerned, you have cyber element into the war, you have the space into the war, you have the information domain into the war, and you have the artificial intelligence decision support tools into the
Air
war.
Marshal, I want to,
So
in terms of, sorry, I'm going to interject for here. Overall, in terms of the situation, of course, at the outset, we are smaller, at least in number. And we knew that from the point get go. There's also, and of course, we know our technology, we know what we have, and we knew what was at disposal for us. What do you think was a game changer? What do you think was that one? Of course, it's skill. It's the man behind the gun. There's no denying that. And a salute to our armed forces, to our air force. There's no two ways of looking at that. But what do you think was the turning point that put us ahead of a country that is at least larger than us in numbers, and like they say that the budget and the equipment and all of that?
thank you. So, every institution played its role very effectively. All the forces, Army, Air Force, Navy was very instrumental. But the game changer, I would say, as far as the use of force, was the Pakistan Air Force and the air battle. And within the Air Force, the game changer was their training and their technology integration. And this I have been saying from the day one, even before the start of the conflict, that this will happen like that. And today, if you see all international magazines and independent analysts, they are saying exactly the same language. If you take my interview about 5 years, 5 days back, sorry, it mentioning two important things in which the Pakistan Air Force has edged since last 40, 50 years. And they have proved it to be the turning point and the one which has always been their strength. And first thing is the training. The training has in Air Force been so solid, on so solid footing that there has never been a compromise. We train and we fight like we train, and we train in the best of the scenarios and the most realistic environments. Second thing, in today's warfare, as I mentioned, that because of the visibility of the airspace and the density of the airspace in which there are going to be hundreds of aircraft at one time, which did happen on 6th and 7th night. So it is very important that your whole, all sensors and shooters should be integrated into one to form a kill chain, which is very effective and very efficient in responding. I mean, the decision loop should be very small because the tempo of operation is so fast that if you don't shoot, after 2 or 3 seconds, he will shoot. This is how we were able to shoot Rafale earlier than they shot our J-10 or F-16s, because we had a solid and a very efficient sensor shooter integration with good resilience of network and a common operating picture which was available to us and our commanders to take decisions both in air and on the ground. Our all sensors, and by sensors I mean radars, electronic sensors, EW, they were all connected, and they were all connected with the shooters, which are the aircraft and the missile systems and your all other things which are kinetically used. And they were all meshed together. So we were able to respond earlier. We were able to take electronic countermeasures earlier. We were able to jam them earlier, and we were able to shoot them earlier. So this is a complete chain which has to be followed. And I personally think these were the two things which were the game changer. Otherwise, if you see that all the three aspects, in the air, they had the best of the aircraft, which is Rafale. On ground, they have the best of the missile systems, which is a SAM S-400 Russian. And in the drones technology, they had the best of the drones, Harpy and Herons, which are battle tested, which are state of the art, cutting edge technology of Israel, and was very effectively used in Armenia Azerbaijan war, where Azerbaijanis used it so effectively that that was the game changer for winning war for Azerbaijan and creating a control of air. But all these three things were neutralized by Pakistan. And in the future, you will see that there will be a lot of study, a lot of analysis, and as well as lesson learning from how it really happened. That the Chinese aircraft and the Chinese missiles were able to shoot down these technologies of French, Russian, and
Right.
Israel
Let me come
origin.
back to you. Let me come back to you, Aamir Sahib. I'll come back to you. Jauhar Sahib, I want to ask your opinion on the UN treaty with regard to we've seen the way that it was revoked, our Indus Water Treaty. As far as the UN Charter is concerned, there are provisions within it that will deal with this kind of an eventuality arising again, are there not? I mean, when we sit and talk to them, these are issues that perhaps should be on the table and probably will be, right?
Sure. And basically, the Indus Waters Treaty actually does not have any clause which allows either of the parties to unilaterally put it in suspension or abeyance. So this is a violation of the treaty itself, number one. It's also a violation of international laws, because in international laws and as in a riparian state, you have a whole lot of responsibilities that you can't shirk from. Thirdly, in terms of the United Nations, of course, in the United Nations, because water it's a very important issue. That is basic survival. That is the sort of food security of a country. So if they actually, because so far they have put it in abeyance, but after that, if you take any actions, like we had said that you would recall, we had said that if you would take any actions after that, any acts in terms of blocking the waters or diverting the waters, because as per this treaty, the Indus Waters Treaty, the three western rivers were allocated to Pakistan, and the three eastern rivers were allocated to India. So but they have the capacity to, because they are the upper riparian, and they built a number of dams there. There's some capacity, although our experts were a little kind of, they were not really, there was not a consensus on that. But my understanding, based on some of the experts that we have in our institute, is that even in the short term, there is manipulation that is possible from their side, because they have the technical capability of for that. There are lots of dams that they have there on these, on the western rivers. So if they do any acts like that, if they actually block waters or divert waters, then Pakistan could raise the issue even in the United Nations Security Council, because then it's a serious issue, and the United Nations Security Council is there for prevention of disputes, But then there are other mechanisms within the UN system, like International Court of Justice. You being a jurist yourself, you would know that's part of the UN system. That is where you could go, in terms of the violation of the treaty as well as the international laws on it. There are some other sort of arbitration mechanisms available as well. We could go there. So there's a range of options available to Pakistan. But what I hope is that now that the two countries have agreed upon a path of dialogue, that this thing would be discussed in the dialogue that will be instituted. And I hope that this would be one of the first things to be resolved there.
In terms of isolation, diplomatic isolation, we know that India has for a while been peddling the narrative that Pakistan is isolated, it doesn't seem to have a good relationship with other countries, even regional, and there is generally this terrorism, and the fact that of course, as far as FATF is concerned, and the fact that even the fact that we're out of FATF was played up in a different way on Indian media. This effectively also has demonstrated, don't you agree, and what is your opinion on this, that we have a very solid bank of countries and friends who stand by us, and that we have a relationship with regional partners, a very strong relationship?
Definitely. First of all, this whole myth that they try to create, this is, it has never found any traction, because the intense diplomacy that Pakistan is having for the last many years now, it's a testament to the fact that Pakistan is not diplomatically isolated by any stretch of imagination. But even in the recent episode, let's see, all the statements that emanated from around the world were basically statements not in India's favor. The statements just call for exercising restraint, call for de-escalation, and because Pakistan was not the one which was pushing things towards escalation, so they were basically meant towards India. Then look at the Americans. The statements that we saw coming from the US called upon both the parties again, although they're strategic partners within the framework of the US-India Pacific strategy, and they're members of Quad and so many other organizations together. Despite that, and then in terms of our close friends, China stood by us, very strong statements of support from China. Turkey, for instance, Saudi Arabia got, the statements were there, and they also got involved in very intense diplomacy. UAE was there, Iran was there, so many different countries. So I think we, on both counts, in terms of that myth, I think that myth was totally busted, that Pakistan is in any way sort of isolated. And the second thing is that our friends, the close friends, they all they all supported us. They were there, and they were trying to ensure that, this crisis would not really blow up.
Right, fair enough. On that note, we'll be taking a short break for Azan, and after which we'll come back and talk about what the situation is at this time, of course, post ceasefire, and what do we expect from the talks. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Aamir Sahab, I'm going to go to you. Overall, there's a lot that is now being said for the Chinese technology that is in the field. Do you think that, and the fact that, of course, this is kind of a deep-seek moment for the Chinese technology, would you agree with this? Do you think that, the Chinese technology is at par with the Western technology? How would you rate, what is available at this time?
Sorry, I can't hear your question. Actually, it's a little bit, your voice is not audible.
Aamir Sahab, can you hear me now?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Aamir Sahab, I'm saying that this seems to be, it is being said, a deep-seek moment for the Chinese technology that is available. Do you think that it is at par with what is available in the West? Do you think it's far superior? What is your take on, what is available in the West versus what is being, manufactured and made in China?
So China has come a long way as far as the technology development is concerned. And yes, what impression we had of Chinese technology and everyone had was that they have been copying the technology and they don't have their original research and development, and they are basically, doing reverse engineering. So that was true, maybe, 20 years back. But I can vouch and I can say it with a lot of confidence that today Chinese technology, if not better, is at par with the Western and American technology, because they're spending budget equivalent to the whole budget of Europe as far as their R&D is concerned. They are very particular about the quality assurance, reliability, and the serviceability of their technology. So we have been using Chinese technology in Pakistan since last almost 50 years plus. And I've been flying their aircraft, which was the previous the MiG jets, which were there in 90s and 80s. And today, if you fly J10 or JF-17, so there's a leap and bound improvement as far as the technology is concerned, as far as the integration of technology is concerned. And they have a very, I would say, a little bit edge as far as their weapons are concerned, especially their air to ground weapons, their ranges, their accuracy is, I would say, a little bit, if not much better than the Western missiles. Moreover, I would just like to highlight this thing also, that they have integrated the artificial intelligence algorithms much better. And that is there, I would say, one of the strong points as well. So all in all, Chinese technology has moved ahead in every department, and especially
Right.
in the military. I think they have.
Thank you so much, Aamir Masood Saab. Thank you for your very comprehensive and detailed answer to questions that I think everybody wants to know. Thank you for joining us. We have limited time. Jauhar Saab, my last question to you. How do you see, what you see as the future of diplomatic relations between Pakistan and India after this latest spate of aggression that we've seen?
I mean, that depends a lot on India's attitude naturally, because they being the bigger country in the region, many times bigger than us in terms of population, in terms of area, in terms of economy, on all counts. Because you see, so far what we had seen was kind of, an attitude of hegemony, of sort of, of an attitude of sort of, where they wanted to dominate the region. And that mutual respect, which has to be there, like, was not there in their dealings with other countries of the region. And that's not just true for Pakistan, whether it was Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, whether it was Nepal, all the countries complained, and they had sort of, in one way or the other, strained relations with India. That was there. Now, if India would change that attitude into a more responsible one, into a more positive one, more constructive one, then there could be a very bright future for this region, because the change has to come from them. And I think this is a good moment in time, because now that when they start, we start this dialogue now, I think that could be the defining moment if they decide to come there with a constructive and positive attitude, and actually an attitude to come and solve things, through negotiations, and all the issues are resolvable, whether it's the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, the dispute, whether it's the waters issues, whether it's Sachin, whether it's Sir Creek, all of them through negotiations, through a positive and constructive attitude. Because Pakistan has been willing for that always. We have been always sort of, following the path of dialogue and peaceful resolution of disputes, and sort of, under the UN Charter and the international laws. So I believe that India needs to bring this change into their sort of policy. And if they do that, then I can tell you that this region, which is the most populous region of the world and the youngest population of the world as well, could become the most dynamic and most vibrant region in terms of peace and development.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for joining us, Jauhar Saleem. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining us, Aamir Masood Saab. Overall, of course, we will, of course, have the first series of talks tomorrow, and we will, of course, lay down the aggression, the way that it was propelled from the Indian side. We will also give proofs of how this false flag operation happened, and of course, the fact that there is lack of any evidence that was presented. Let's hope that the realization and the reality check that India has received is enough for them to realize that there needs to be a working relationship with a neighbor like Pakistan that has, if not more than equal, as far as that is equal in every way, and of course as an enemy, Pakistan has the ability to crush them. And there can be a working relationship and a talk on all those issues that exist between Pakistan and India. And there can be peace in the region, which is what all our friends and the world seems to be angling for. Thank you so much for joining us today.